By the 13th century, nearby wood fuel was exhausted, and so people turned to coal for fuel. The coal was high in sulfur content and produced smoke when burned. Over the next few centuries, London underwent massive expansion and commercialization. The early 1800s marked the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and with it came the increased presence of factories which also used coal for power. The over-reliance on coal caused British cities to suffer from all types of pollution. However, no environmental protection was put in place because pollution prevention would have caused the newly industrialized London to lose some of its profits. A common slogan of the era was, "Muck is money." Eventually, the negligence resulted in the disaster that is known as the Great London Smog, which lasted 4 days, December 5th to December 9th in 1952. The days leading up to the disaster, London was experiencing very cold weather. The cold resulted in residents burning large amounts of coal to keep warm. The high sulfur coal produced high emissions of sulfur oxides that quickly turned to sulfuric acid in the atmosphere. Chimneys at the time were shorter and therefore did not release the smoke higher into the atmosphere. The smoke from chimneys and plants cooled quickly and settled into the fog already blanketing the city. Before this, the fog wasn't particularly smoky or dry in character, but by nightfall on December 5th, the fog had thickened greatly. The following day, the sun was too low in the sky to burn away the fog. The mixing of the fog and the smoke created smog in the inversion layer. An inversion layer is a layer of the atmosphere in which temperature increases with height. The inversion of stagnant warm air above cooler air locks in pollutants, while blocking most sunlight. As a result, temperatures cooled and residents burned even more coal to keep warm. A Londoner in the days of the smog experienced a spike in pollution exposure. The smog and the pollutants resulted in several biological, environmental, and socioeconomic consequences. Biological consequences. Post-London smog, a lot of deaths were blamed on the influenza epidemic, but most of the deaths caused by respiratory infections due to hypoxia and mechanical obstruction of the air passages. In the first 3 weeks, 4,000 people died during the smog and immediate post-smog. An approximate total of 12,000 died from lingering effects of smog. Infants directly exposed to the smog were 3% more likely to be diagnosed with cancer. Due to the smog, there were around 1,280 fewer births that year than expected. Callahan and al. 2006 discussed the channels through which fetal exposure to pollutants can affect health. The particulate matter that was most common is polycystic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAH. The PAH are able to cross the placenta and form radicals when metabolized, exposing the fetus to oxidative stress. In the first trimester, when the fetus is exposed to PAH, it can affect the formation of the neural tube and will result in harmful effects. After the smog, death rates remained above normal. Mortality rates from the smog episode were 50 to 300% higher than the previous year. Death rates from bronchitis and pneumonia increased compared to previous years. Environmental and socioeconomic consequences. Several chemical pollutants were released into the environment during the Great Smog, including smoke particles, carbon dioxide, hydrochloric acid, fluorine compounds, and sulfur dioxide, which was converted into sulfuric acid. Thousands of animal deaths occurred due to asphyxiation of cattle and other animals. Breeders improvised gas masks for their animals by soaking grain sacks in whiskey. The decreased visibility caused more birds to fly into buildings and resulted in increased robberies. Throughout the 4 days of the London smog, it caused most of the city to shut down as visibility was decreased. Most forms of transportation stopped. All flights were grounded. Grocery stores, malls, and theaters were closed since people could not get to them, and most people stayed inside during these periods. Changes made post-smog. The Clean Air Act of 1956 controlled domestic sources of smoke pollution, so smokeless zones were established where only smokeless fuels could be used. The focus was reducing smoke pollution, although it reduced sulfur dioxide levels too. This act reduced the air pollution through domestic emissions being reduced, electricity and gas usage increasing, cleaner coal was burned with lower sulfur content, taller chimney stacks were built, power stations were relocated to rural areas, and there was a decline in heavy industry. The Clean Air Act of 1968 declared that tall chimneys had to be used for industries that were burning coal or other fuels. Higher chimneys disperse the air pollution better than low chimneys. It was noted that smoke pollution can be controlled, but sulfur dioxide removal is difficult. This month, New Delhi has been in the news for their extremely bad air quality. The smog in New Delhi has been caused by heavy air pollution from car fumes, industrial emissions, and smoke from stubble burning of farms in neighboring states. The air pollution is 20 times greater than what is considered safe by the World Health Organization. The director of the All Indian Institute of Medical Sciences says that the smog in November was comparable to the Great London Smog of 1952. The London smog disaster can be seen as an example of how air pollution can have massive impacts on humans and the surrounding environment. The lesson learned from the disaster can be used to implement policies that may help cities around the world with air quality control in the future.